Well, if you turned on your TV this weekend, you saw a weekend of violence, political statements in the streets of Los Angeles after immigration raids started on Friday. Both Friday and Saturday nights, however, turned into violent protests against federal agents, prompting the president to deploy the California National Guard. But he did so in a way that is incredibly unusual. He did it without the approval of Governor Gavin Newsom, something that hasn't happened I'm going to say since Selma, Alabama, back in the 60s.
Yeah.
So it's an unusual way to bring in the National Guard.
Yeah, and military Humvees with armed troops from the 79th Infantry Brigade Combat Team have moved in with the Pentagon threatening active duty Marines from Camp Pendleton could be sent in if the streets don't quiet down. Local police battled back crowds and made arrests, even though they are barred from taking part in immigration enforcement.
ABC News correspondent Alex Stone has been covering the scene unfolding all weekend. Alex, what did it look like before the National Guard got there?
LaDonna and Heidi, kind of what it looks like now. The National Guard, what their role is going to be, isn't totally clear in all of this. The police chief saying that he's not against the National Guard being here. He may have gotten to that point at some point down the road, but that there are steps that they normally would take and mutual aid that they would call in and that they would say, hey, this is a type of military unit we want. Probably not a combat brigade, but military police who are trained in police tactics and not war tactics. So yeah, he says, but because they're federalized, which you're right, it was 1965, the last time Lyndon Johnson did that in Selma, Alabama, that they're not communicating with the LAPD. They had one conference call together. They don't know what their role is going to be. The National Guard was quickly outnumbered last night, and the LAPD had to come in and take it over. So there's just all this uncertainty around it, but a lot of violence in the streets. Very long night for the LAPD, and National Guard was nowhere to be seen last night once it got big. And the LAPD moved in, but even 2 o'clock in the morning, the LAPD was battling back folks who were protesters who were throwing concrete and shooting off fireworks at them. So it was a very long night.
We're joined by ABC's Alex Stone. Alex, how many Guard members were deployed and when did they arrive on the scene? There are some conflicting reports between the president and LA Mayor Karen Bass.
Yeah, so about 2,000 have been deployed. The last word, and this may have gone up overnight, but about 300 are here. They arrived yesterday morning, and they mainly were around a federal building where they were shield to shield around that building until they became outnumbered, and then police came in. But they're helping out mainly the federal agents in the way that they have been federalized. But at last word, around 300 of them are here.
So, let's talk a little bit about the possibility of the military coming in because, now we're really kind of messing with posse comitatus, which also has an interesting history. But we're seeing that there are 500 Marines on standby at 29 Palms, not actually from Camp Pendleton. What does that look like if you try to bring in active duty military?
It's a good question. And law enforcement leaders here will tell you that is the last thing that they want is a team of warriors really coming in who would not be on police radios, who do not train with police, who have different rules of engagement, who are not trained in crowd control in the streets of the U.S., who are trained to go into Iraq and Afghanistan and deal with crowds there in a very different way. Somewhat openly, but very much internally, as we've been talking to longtime law enforcement leaders here in California, that they say that they need to work with those who they know how to work with, that they only now are calling in the 10,000 members of the Sheriff's Department as mutual aid, that you send in active duty Marines and the ball game totally changes. If they were to fire on protesters, if police and military didn't agree on something, who would go the way that they want to go on the streets of Los Angeles. There's just a lot going on. But the big part of it being they would not be communicating with one another. They would not be police radios of the LAPD telling the Marines what they're doing over here and the Marines doing an operation that the LAPD doesn't know about. A lot of problems with all of that. At this point, it's a threat from the president. The leadership within law enforcement is, I think, kind of back channeling, saying, please don't do that. We'll see what goes on.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for your time today, and please stay safe out there.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.